both Dr. Roden and Senator Schumer, in their own ways, sort of talked about how this is not what we hope to be a conversation that will be at 10,000 feet. Senator Schumer talked about the auto industry. I would say he's sort of talking about taking a look under the hood. Dr. Roden said that we're talking about conversations at a kitchen table. And so what those two things together mean to us, and to us together, we hope, is that this is not a conversation about how the economy is doing or the economy as some kind of entity in itself. This is a conversation about how people are doing, how people sort of live and dream and make money and raise children and meet or fall short of their aspirations. So it's more the economy as a means, and so it's how are we as Americans doing in the economy rather than how the economy is doing in itself. The way we'd like to do that is through our distinguished panelists, led off by Peter Gosselin, with whom we were fortunate at the Rockefeller Foundation to work with him on his book. So I will briefly introduce the panelists in the order in which they will speak. Many of you already know that Peter's been a national economics correspondent for the Los Angeles Times back since 1999. As I mentioned, we are very proud, Dr. Roden and her staff, to have funded Peter to conduct research for this book that is just been published, that I hope you all have a copy of, called High Wire. This is a culmination of a series of stories that Peter wrote for the Los Angeles Times. It's about family income instability and economic insecurity. It's a thesis that he first laid out in 2004 in a series called The New Deal, and in follow-up stories that followed in 2005 and 2006. Peter sort of talks about, in this book, a largely unappreciated trend of the last 25 years about a substantial shift in risk borne by government and employers and workers, mostly onto workers in this current economy. Before coming to the LA Times, Peter was a journalist with stints at the Boston Globe, the Providence Journal, and the Catskill, New York Daily Mail. Peter's reporting has earned him the National Headliner Award and 2 George Polk Awards. Peter is a graduate of Brown University with a degree in philosophy. Yes, that was my degree. And was a fellow at Columbia University, where he also received his master's in business and in economics. Peter lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, many of whom you know, Robert Toner, a distinguished New York Times correspondent, and their 2 children. After Peter speaks, we'll be joined by David Brooks, who also, as many of you know, is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. He writes frequently about politics and modern American culture. Many of you know David Brooks from his book published in 2000, Bobos in Paradise, The New Upper Class and How They Got There. David's a native. He was born in Stuytown here in New York. He graduated from the University of Chicago. His big career break came from a parody he wrote of William F. Buckley while in school. In David's words, I'm quoting, "I wrote that Buckley's hobbies included extended bouts of name-dropping and going into rooms to make everyone else feel inferior. Buckley came to the University of Chicago, delivered a lecture, and said, 'David Brooks, if you're in this audience, I'd like to offer you a job.' David started work at the National Review a few years later. And then after that, David joined the Washington Times in 1984 as a writer of editorials and film reviews. And 2 years later, he became an editor and foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Brooks was then based in Brussels and reported from both sides of the Iron Curtain. In '94, he joined the Weekly Standard at its inception as senior editor. And David is also was editor of the 1996 anthology Backward and Upward, The New Conservative Writing. David lives with his wife and 3 children in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I might add that all this is very impressive, but it all pales in comparison to the fact that David Brooks is the subject of a cartoon in the New Yorker this week, which is available for your inspection here at the podium, should you be interested. Our third speaker this afternoon also probably needs a little introduction from the likes of me. It is Mark Shields. Mark is, of course, a nationally known columnist and moderator of CNN's Capital Gang. And Mark has provided weekly political analysis on the NewsHour back since 1988. The first career for Mark was as a Washington insider, though. Originally, he was a legislative assistant to Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin. By age 31, he was running Robert Kennedy's California campaign for president in 1968. That's not true. He later worked on presidential campaigns for Democrats Sargent Shriver and Edmund Muskie. After 15 years, Mark made the transition to the media side of politics. And in 1979, he began writing his column on national politics for the Washington Post. The column is now distributed nationally by Creators Syndicate, Mark provided political analysis of the 1988, 92, 96, and 2000 presidential elections. And in 1988, contributed to the political coverage that won a Peabody for the NewsHour.
Editor at that.
Mark has also provided an election analysis for CBS and NBC. He graduated the University of Notre Dame and served as an enlisted man in the Marines. And like our other panelists, Mark has written a book. His is called On the Campaign Trail. It's a narrative account which documents the 1984 presidential race. Mark lives in Washington with his wife, Ann, who is the Chief of Staff at the Interior Department. We all know we are very much in the middle of a political season, and David's opening comments will be followed by Mark talking about what the implications for this campaign season are for how Americans are feeling about the economy, both how they feel about it today and what they think its long-term prospects are. So we will start off with our distinguished author, Peter Gosselin. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.